to start examining what kind of relationship we have with these devices and how attached we are.
Feel uneasy when your phone isn't nearby? Well, it turns out smartphone separation anxiety is absolutely a real thing. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Beth Haynes. Parting with our phones can actually negatively impact our performance on daily tasks, like taking tests or doing work assignments. That's according to new research at the University of Missouri. Well, joining us with more is our tech expert, Dan Thompson with Claris Networks. Really appreciate you being with us. And I think we all may be guilty of this from time to time. I joked I hope that my husband's watching, but I think I'm just as guilty at times. But what an interesting study.
Sure.
What exactly did the study find?
Yeah, and so before we go into that, add this to the things I never thought we'd be talking about 15 years ago, right? So,
who knew?
So the study found that basically the way they did it is they would check people's blood pressure. They told them that they were testing out a new blood pressure device, and then ran through a series of tests. And what they found was exactly what you just described, which is when they were taking the test at sort of the baseline, they take the cell phone away. They would claim that it was interfering with the device, their Bluetooth. And so they would take their cell phones away, and then their anxiety levels, heart rates, blood pressure rates would go up. And then, some of them would report when they were done, that they experienced anxiety or that they didn't like the test anymore, or, psychological and physiological things that go along with that. Pretty fascinating stuff. Probably disturbing stuff as well,
disturbing.
But interesting nonetheless.
But think when you're in a remote location and you don't have cell service or for your data. I mean, it can be alarming and unnerving at the same time. Let's talk about why are we such a connected society? I mean, it's instant information constantly.
That's right. Yeah, and you have to imagine. Actually, my pocket just vibrated, but you have to imagine that it's somewhat of a Pavlovian response, right? As we've just gotten used to our pockets vibrating or dings happening, and so just the interconnectivity of social media. I mean, you sign up for one, before you know it, you're signed up for 10, and that means there's 10 times more vibrations in your pocket. Right, and it's something that we have admittedly done to ourselves.
Sure.
You see people all the time. I mean, used to on a train in pick a city, people would be reading the newspaper.
Yep.
Now almost everyone is heads down in their phone, and it's just a technological change, and it's one that we will have to at some point say, maybe we need a break.
What I think is pretty remarkable is how this obsession has changed so quickly.
Yes.
Just within the last couple of years.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I attribute that some to the social medias that I was describing a second ago, and some of it's just, it's just fun sometimes. Like I'll get a thought, and I'll think, oh, I wonder what that is, and you'll research it, and, it's always a rabbit trail, right? One idea leads to another idea, and then 15 minutes later, you're like, oh, geez, I need to get something else done here.
But we all talk about what we do without our phones, and how do we survive
I know.
before we had all of this.
Yeah, and this is kind of a fun thought exercise that I like to do with myself. Like if I'm standing in line and I catch myself just, mindlessly browsing my phone, I'm like, what did we do before I had cell phone? Oh yeah, I would stand here and look at the magazine. Something else interesting that I've observed is it's also a killer of creativity.
I've heard this.
Because, used to when you were standing there and you had nothing to do, you would just sort of have these free thoughts, like your mind would just wander and you would come up with.
Daydream a little?
Yes, exactly. But we've replaced that time now with just screen time. So you're looking at your tweets or your Facebook feed. Interesting what maybe that could do to us.
Well, and not only can we get smartphone separation anxiety, but there's also something called phantom vibration syndrome. Are you sure that was a real
I'm not,
message?
Actually. I have experienced this one myself, and this is when you think you have felt something vibrate in your pocket. So, and most people, they experience this when they use the vibration mode on their phones. And I used to experience this all the time, in fact, and it would freak me out. And I started researching, I was like, oh wow, this is a real thing. So how I have personally combated this, turn most of the notifications off on your phone, except for like phone rings and things like that. There's one notification, I'm sure it's what it just was a second ago, but that I just can't figure out how to turn off. But to limit those so it's not constantly vibrating, I also, when I'm at work, will take the phone out of my pocket, lay it over on the side of my desk somewhere, just so that it's not constantly in my pocket. But yeah, so it's interesting to me that your body is having a reaction even though your phone's not there, so that suggests that there's some, addiction's probably a strong word, but there's some kind of tie there.
We may need some support groups for this.
No, it's kind of random, and I'm sure there's lots of people at home laugh just thinking this is totally outrageous, but it seems to be a thing.
A lot of truth to it, for sure. Always glad to have you on. Thanks for coming.
No problem.
Very interesting. Well, making high-speed internet cheaper and more accessible. Coming up next, the new measures from President Obama to get us all connecting faster. And later in sports, she's a threat.